I'll try to hold it.
You do kind of have to talk into it.
Is it all right if I drink while I talk?
You can drink and talk. You know, no judgment here.
So thank you, Jan. Thank you for the invitation and to present this program that I have for you tonight. Jan assured me that she wanted a really good presentation that would keep this group awake. So having heard this one that I was going to give you tonight, it's going to be the one that I've had very good results with. It's my talk on underwater basket weaving in Siberia.
When I called him on Monday, I said, "Are we all set to go on Tuesday?" And he said, "What? Who is this?" And that's the moment where your heart sinks and you just kind of go, "Oh my God."
Always trying to help out.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, tonight she has asked me to spend a little time talking about ham radio. First of all, how many of you know about ham radio? Just raise your hands. Okay. How many of you know a ham radio operator? Well, there's a few. You guys that are already hams, that's not fair. That doesn't count. And let's see, I'm going to have to get over here. My bifocals aren't working very well here with my nose. Okay, tonight I have a couple of henchmen along with me that I want to introduce, and they will also be presenters tonight. First of all, I want to introduce our club president, Larry Mahundro, and then one of our presenters will be Barry Doyle, and then last but not least, our YL presenter, Carla Kiefner. So there will be some help here, which I probably will need. Okay, ham radio, been around since about 1903. First ham radio operator was probably Marconi, and then it's probably, some would say, has gone downhill since then. But we're still in there plugging away, and a lot of people, first of all, want to know, what do you have to do to become a ham radio operator? Well, it's really very simple. You have to take a test that our national group, the Amateur Radio Relay League, has set up with volunteer examiners. So you can take it right here in Jackson the first Monday night of any month for any of the ham radio ratings. You can also take it online. And actually, it's the same price, but you have to go through a lot more rigmarole because there's obviously security concerns. If you're taking it in your home online, and somebody who's the administrator, he's setting in Phoenix or he's setting someplace away, he's going to want to make sure that you don't have too many cheat sheets hanging about. So the price is the same. You come and take it with CMO Amateur Radio Club, it's $15. You take it online, they're $15. The only other fees that are involved, you do have to pay a $35 fee and I hate to mention that in this group, but it's to our federal government, to the FCC. And that pays basically for issuing your call sign and keeping record of you. We have three different levels. We have in our ham group, we have technicians, general class, and extra. The main difference between those is in that each, starting with the technician, that's the entry-level group, and you have limited privileges there on air, and going on up to general, which gives you most privileges, and then finally the extra, which are those of us who walk on water when everything else doesn't fail. Technician class has 35 questions, general has 35, extra has 50. And you need to have successfully answered correctly 26 of them to get a technician class license. So the technician class is, as I said, that's the entry level, gives you privileges on VHF, UHF frequencies, basically short range. And then you go on up to the general class, which gives you all kinds of privileges. You can talk to people literally around the world with the general class license. Lots of fun. And you can get on there and, as we say, we call a CQ, which is sort of like fishing. You throw your line in the water and you say CQ, and then you give your call sign, and you never know who's going to answer back. It might be someone in Florida. It might be someone in Canada. It could be anywhere in the world, literally, depending on the time of day and the frequency that you're using. So that's one of the things that we can do. Does that cover the how-to? Everyone happy with that? Okay. Then, once you have got your ham radio license, what are you going to do with it? Well, there's just all kinds of things. The ham radio community is kind of divided into two groups with a lot, and I mean a lot of crossovers. You have those people who are interested in public service. They're the ones who go out and they'll do storm chasing. They're storm spotters, and Barry's going to talk a lot more about that on his segment. Then we have the hobby section. Well, again, you can talk to somebody literally all over the world. And the really neat thing about ham radio is the bands are open 24/7. There's never any downtime. You know, if you want to go fishing, and if it's raining and the wind's blowing, you can't go fishing. But if it's rainy and the wind's blowing and you want to get on and operate your ham radio station, you can get on. And there will be someone, somewhere, who will come back and talk to you. And it's the same thing is true. If you're having insomnia, you can't sleep, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. What do? Well, I suppose if you're like Carla back there, or my wife, and you're a quilter, you could go and quilt. Maybe there's some other quilters back there. But there's always somebody on the air that you can talk to, that you can make a contact with. The other part of it, as I said, it's the social aspect of it. We do have an amateur radio club here in the counties, Southeast Missouri Amateur Radio Club. It's been around since about 1956 and generally has around 60 members. And at any one of our meetings, we meet the first Monday night of the month, unless it's a holiday. But at any one of our meetings, we'll have usually around 20 or 25 members who will show up. And of course, that's also the time that we can do testing. One of the other activities that we have is fox hunting. And we are avid, a bunch of us, fox hunters. Now, before I get anyone too upset about this, maybe I should explain one thing. Fox isn't a little sweet, cuddly, fuzzy animal. It's a hidden transmitter. And you'd be amazed at the different places that you could hide a little hidden transmitter like this. And typically what our group enjoys doing, we'll go out to, say, Jackson City Park or one of the city parks in Cape Girardeau, and we'll split into a couple of groups, and each group will hide one of the foxes. And this is really a direction finding project. And it has application to the real world in that if somebody is interfering with police, fire, public service, with our own frequencies, then we use direction finding and we can locate them. And hopefully we can turn off the source of the interference then. But Also, the other thing that we like to do at these fox hunts, we usually say everybody brings a bag, paper bag lunch, sack lunch, and then those who are so interested, we encourage them to bring desserts. And I don't know if you're involved in some other groups, this one obviously you like to eat here, but ham radio operators love to eat. And if they love to eat anything, it's dessert. And you can by looking at some of us, we haven't missed too many desserts along the way. So we bring a sack lunch, we have desserts, and then we go hunting for Mr. Fox. And usually there's at least a couple of them. Sometimes there's 3, and then typically it takes, we've had groups find it in very as little as 15 minutes?
Yeah, we had one person that was really good at it.
So sometimes it's fast, but then we also do those that are really more of real world involved, in which we'll say the fox is hidden somewhere in Jackson, in the city limits, or it's somewhere in the Cape city limits. That takes a lot longer. They have found me. I'm usually the fox. They call me the gray-haired fox or the silver fox. I don't know where they got that. But we have had instances there where Mr. Fox has not been found. But we also have had instances where they found me in 30 minutes or less. And that's, again, they have no idea where I am in the city limits of Jackson, but they still found me. And we did have one instance that was real world. A few years ago, we had someone who was not involved with the club, who had a grandchild who was playing with their ham radio station. And they accidentally had the transmitter on, and they had a microphone that you could lock in the on position. And evidently about that time, when little Tommy or Jamie or whatever it was had played with Grandpa's microphone, Grandpa said, "Let's go," and they were leaving for the weekend. And so they were hanging up one of our 2-meter repeaters. And we found him in about 45 minutes. So it does have real world implications. And so that's one reason that we practice that, in addition to the fun that we have. One of our other activities are ham fests. What would you guess a ham fest is? We go and eat ham? That would be logical, but it isn't really. It's just another name for a swap meet. And actually, we're going to have one in our neighborhood in next month. The River Hills Amateur Radio Club in Perryville is going to be having a ham fest. And as I said, this is a swap meet. Everyone's invited, and if you've never been to something like that, I'd be glad to have you. Oh, and I forgot the best part too about fox hunting. We're having a fox hunt. Everyone's invited. Y'all can come and see what we do. And let's see, that is going to be, gosh, don't tell me I didn't write that down.
May 3rd.
May the 3rd. Okay, May the 3rd. It's going to be in the Jackson City Park, shelter number 5. And that's the one that you turn into if you're going down to the band shell. So y'all are invited. There'll be plenty of dessert. And anyone who wants to bring one, you're welcome to do that as well. But we'll put you with one of the groups and let you go and see what we do to find Mr. Fox. Okay, I did have that down here, May the 3rd. So those 2 activities, we have May the 3rd, the fox hunt. April the 12th is the ham fest up at Perryville. One of our other activities that allow the club members enjoy is working what are called, or making contacts with Parks on the Air. And this is really a good exercise for us for emergency communications, which again, Barry will talk about that in his segment. But we have individuals who just really enjoy going out like the Trail of Tears. They'll set up a radio station out there, and they'll make contacts with people, again, literally all over the world. And we have a bunch of parks in the United States. Would anyone care to guess how many parks are in the United States? Okay, I'll save you the trouble. There's over 12,000 of them. So, lots of parks for people who enjoy doing this. And we have one of our club members that he just, that's one of his things. I don't know how many parks he's put on the air. And so you have people who are activators, and Neil, you and your son have activated. How many have you activated?
Here locally,
Yeah,
about three
3.
to
And,
4.
and
And my son travels all over the country doing that. He's a pilot, so he'll find when he's spending the night at a certain city, he'll go find a local park and set up a communications unit. And his little radio fits in the palm of his hand, and he'll contact people thousands of miles away. But he's using Morse code. He's really big into Morse code.
okay, so a lot of people really enjoy this. And again, you know, as in his son and with our club member, they have equipment that really, if everything really goes to pudding, as they say here, as in the earthquake that everyone keeps saying that we could happen here, they have equipment that they would be able to get on the air, and they would be able to put our officials, county, and local guys into contact, for example, with Jefferson City, and be able to tell them what we need down here. Because now y'all know that if something like that happens, or even, heaven forbid, we have a major tornado or something go through here, what's the first thing that's going to go off the air?
Everything, electric, yeah.
Cell phones. Now, if the cell towers are still up, one of the first things that the local officials are able to do is they can cut off their use to the civilian population. And that's one reason a lot of people are interested in ham radio. Now, the other problem that, it's not a problem, but it's something that you need to consider. If you go into ham radio, you do need to go ahead and get a license, and you need to get on the air on a regular basis. Because if you just set the radio up in your closet, when the time comes and push comes to shove, you may not be able to remember how to turn it on. And we had a health and welfare net that used to meet once a month, that we had a lot of the local clinics and hospitals and people who would check into this once a month. And we had a group, and I won't tell you who they are or where they were, but one of the first exercises that we have is once a month, checking to make sure that everything was coming on and going to work. They couldn't remember how to turn it on. And so it then becomes an expensive paperweight. So if you do get interested in this, and there are a lot of people who are in various degrees of being preppers, do plan on getting the air. There's one family that they get on the air once a week. I know they're going to be on there, and they're checking to make sure their antennas are working, their radios are working, and if they need it, it's there. Okay, what else do I need to mention? Oh, I guess I should mention again, going back to this 12,000 parks on the air, my wife is also a ham radio operator, as well as a quilter. And I asked her tonight how many of this 12,000 that she has worked and been able to make contact with. And she said, I'm just a few short of 10,000.
Wow.
And she also had a project going back several years ago of making contact with every county in the 50 states. And there are 3,077 counties, in case you've lost track of them. And she made contact with all 3,077. But as she's quilting, for you quilters, she's got a laptop set up next to her while she's over here quilting away, and she'll go over here and she'll glance at the laptop, and she'll see if there are any parks on the air that she hasn't made a contact with. And if she does, then she'll run downstairs and she'll get the radios on the air, and she'll make contact and she'll strike another one off. Okay, any questions about anything I've covered thus far? All right, last but not least.
Yes, see, what does HAM stand for?
Glad you asked that question. No one seems to know. There have been several things. They say we ham it up, we like to eat ham, but there's no definitive answer to that question. I'm sorry to say.
So the box that you go find, the ELT, is that the same kind of ELT that's put in airplanes for crash landings to
No.
go find?
No. However, a lot of our equipment will cover that. I know you've been involved in Civil Air Patrol over the years, but we have equipment that can cover those frequencies should it be necessary that we could help out. But as long as the Civil Air Patrol and some other groups, they have equipment that may be better suited to that than ours. But now if, for example, somebody is jamming a police frequency or the fire frequency or something like that, then our equipment, then we can move it over. We can chase down someone who might be causing problems there pretty easily. Any other question before I get to my wind up?
I mean, if you find someone that is jamming the things like you just said, and like the grandpa that left, he wasn't home, can you turn it off or change it or something?
Well, we could try to. As I said, Grandpa wasn't there, so we left a note on his door, and we found him like on a Saturday afternoon, and he didn't come back until Sunday afternoon. So we just had to live with it. We talked about several different things, but we said, well, we can live with it. He's going to be back here in a day or two. And sure enough, he was. And he took care of it. Never did become a member of the club. Never understood that quite. Anyway, all right. The other question that frequently comes up was, well, how much is this going to cost as far as equipment? And what do I have to have in a way of equipment in order to get set? Well, you can talk to Neil, and he's gone completely nuts as far as his equipment, and Barry and myself and some of us. But what does it actually cost? Well, if you want to get involved, you can buy a little transceiver like this for $20. And let's see if we can get this to work.
SEMOARC, that's 7 p.m. This evening, good evening. The time is 5:48 p.m.
That's one of the 2-meter receivers that the SEMO Amateur Radio Club maintains. We have this one that is just sort of north of
Near Teen Challenge.
Teen Challenge. We have 2 repeaters that are out there. We have another one that's out at Scopus. So if the tornado comes through and it cleans out the one tower, well, we still got another one that we can fall back on, so that we would be able to help. One of the biggest instances of the ham radio around here was Joplin, Missouri. And the hams out there were on scene helping the administration, city administration of Joplin for about 6 weeks. And they had operators and equipment that shadowed the main officers in the city and the county. And so they could give them real-time communications, because police and fire and some of those, their towers were down. Fortunately, the ham radio tower survived it, and so they were able to help. So we kind of have a saying in ham radio, and that is, when all else fails, ham radio. We're kind of plan C or maybe D down here, but we're all individually funded. We don't get any subsidies from anyone. But anyway, going back to my question, $20 for a nice little transceiver like this that will get you into all our local repeaters. Then if you want something that you can put in your car, we have radios that are this size. They're a little more powerful. The little handheld is a 5-watt radio. This is a 50-watt radio. And this is one that could be used either at your home station or in your automobile. And, again, this covers basically the same frequencies that this does, except receiver's a whole lot better and it runs a whole lot more power. So that if you were in an area where the coverage wasn't just real good, a little extra power would enable you to make communication. Then going on down, this is a high frequency transmitter. And it's a transmitter and a receiver all in one box. And literally with this radio, you could talk to people all over the planet. I've talked to people all the way from Antarctica to Newfoundland to all over Europe, the Philippines, Malaysia, you name it. I've talked to most all of the countries. And this is a 100-watt radio, and most hams will have something like this with a wire antenna. The antenna itself, again, it's a wire antenna. So you get some copper wire and you cut it to dimensions and you're all set to go on the air with it. What was it? Something just shot across my mind and I missed it as it went by. Probably 75% of the amateurs worldwide will have a 100-watt radio and a wire antenna. They're not fancy. They're not like Neil, for gosh sakes, or me, or Barry. We've spent a lot more. I've been a ham since 1960. So I kind of told you I've seen a few changes in this, going from equipment that's this big and bigger to something that size. But you can spend, it's like any other hobby. I don't care if it's hunting, fishing, tennis, golf. You can spend a little or you can spend a ton. If you just go absolutely nuts, you can spend, like Barry, $8,000 on one of those new now. Or you can buy a little radio like this at a ham fest used for a couple of $100. You still would need a 12-volt power supply of some kind or a battery, but you'd still need a power supply to go with it. But very conservatively speaking, you could put a station on the air for probably $300 or $350 that you could talk anywhere on the planet with, depending on the time of day and the frequency. That's my caveats I'll throw in there. That's my spiel. Anybody have questions? Neil?
Ernie, can you explain to the group what materials they would need to study for the quiz to become a technician operator or beginning operator?
Okay. Actually, I did have that in my notes and I skipped right over it. Again, studying for this test used to be that you went to a class, and most of the classes, Barry and I have both taught the technician class, and they usually would run about, 8 weeks, and running 3 hours a night. Well, let's face it, a lot of people, with the way we live today, you don't have that kind of a time commitment, and people were always missing, a class here, a class there, because we would go maybe like 3 times a week and 2 to 3 hours a night to do this. So more and more people are doing one of two things. Either they're going totally online and they're taking the class, or you can go to some online services. We have one that's called QRZ.com, and this is a site that has all of the questions. This is the thing that's really neat about it. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. They give you all of the questions and all of the right answers. So, you know, all you gotta do is sit there, and if you have a decent memory at all, you can memorize it. Because you're going to be given 35 questions out of a pool of about 400. And so still, you go over them, you go to one of these sites and you take it, and you just keep taking the test over and over and over and over until you can pass it. So, and people still, there's still books available. The Amateur Radio Relay League, they've got all kinds of books. Some of the businesses, some of the equipment sellers, they have all kinds of books, all kinds of prices on them. You can get it on discs, you can get it on the cloud or anywhere in between. So it's, you know, how do you learn the best? Do you learn visually? Do you learn orally? Do you need a combination of them? My wife and I, when we passed our extra class license, we just sat there and took test after test after test. We take about 3 of them every day. And that's the way we got ready and got prepared for it. And we were ready to take that test, which is the most difficult one in ham radio. We got ready to take care of it in about 6 weeks. And we both passed it. And she got 2 questions more than I did, and she never lets me forget it. But anyway, but that's the way a lot of people are doing it now. It's online. It's so much more convenient. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Theoretically, if I go online and memorize the answers, but I don't have any idea what I'm doing, so you pass the test, where do you go from there? Yeah, I mean, you don't have any idea what you're doing, but you're licensed.
Where you go from there is to the SEMO Amateur Radio Club, and we'll establish a mentor, or an Elmer as we call them, who will help you and guide you. And most all of us have had an Elmer somewhere in our amateur life who has sat there and has explained all these things that we've either read in books or we have read in taking these courses online. So that's why, that's one of the real nice things about that, and I think Carla will talk about that when she comes up.
In that study material, they just don't give you the questions. They give you the question, but they also explain the question to you. They explain the answer, so you're learning as you're taking the test. And that's how you build up the knowledge of amateur radio. It's not that hard to do. It just takes a little time.
Yeah, the technician's class, the entry-level license is not difficult. The other thing, and I didn't mention that, I'm really remiss in that, there is no code required. You do not have to learn Morse code at all for any of these licenses. When I got my license, I had to learn 13 words a minute of Morse code. Took me forever. Well, 6 months. But, you know, back when you're 20-something, that's forever. No one, well, some of you still remember that. You're still in that age group, I can see. But, no, that's all kinds of studies available. As you said, some of the books, they'll explain the questions. Some of them is just question and answers. If you take the ones online, like through the QRZ, it's just questions and answers. Because when you take the test, you'll have the correct answer and 3 foils. It's multiple guess, as we used to say in teaching. So and it's like any other multiple choice. You can say, oh, that one is crazy, you know, and that one is probably crazy, and oh, those two are really close together. And then you use the flipping of the coin. Or I always say, use the one that's longest. Because frequently that's the correct answer. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So, what do you talk about when you get somebody in Malaysia? How's the weather over there?
Actually, that's true. That's usually you start off when you're talking to someone like that, and you'll talk about your equipment, your antennas.
6 p.m. Tuesday, March 4th.
I'll have to quiet the radio over here. But you usually start talking about that, then you talk about weather, and then from there on, it can go anywhere.
So is there a particular lingo?
Uh,
You know, like the old CBers, they had the.
Oh, yes, ham radio has acronyms, and we have lingo, just like any other hobby has. I don't care whether it's tennis or golf or anything else, they've all got a language of their own. But the one thing that I didn't mention that has really, I won't say taken the ham radio by storm, but it's really coming along, and that's digital. We have a mode that's called FT4. And the really neat thing about it is a foreign station doesn't have to be able to speak a word of English. All he's got to do is to find someone who can program his computer with a couple of questions and answers, and he is good to go, and you can talk to him and you can make the contact with him. And so a lot of foreign stations have gone digital for that reason. But there's still a lot of people who are on the voice, on the single sideband, as we say, and you get somebody from the Soviet, I won't say Soviet Union, because that's not there anymore, but from Russia, Ukraine. Believe it or not, there are Ukrainian ham stations on the air right now. I worked one last week, and but some of them, I always say their English is a whole lot better than my Ukrainian or my Japanese or whatever the language happens to be. But English is still the dominant language on radio. So that's really not a problem. As I said, you might have to listen really closely if somebody has got a really strong accent, but you just may not talk to them real long. But I remember one of the most interesting conversations I had was one day I called the CQ, was fishing, and a fella in South Africa came back to me. And he happened to be a mining engineer in a gold mine there. And he started explaining about gold mining and how deep some of those shafts were and what the temperature was in those mines. And 100 degrees at the bottom of those shafts. I thought, but I talked to one guy one day who was, what do they call him, an animatronic engineer for Disney. You just never know who you're going to talk to. Who was it? King Hussein. He was a ham radio operator, and he used to be on air. Barry Goldwater was an operator, and we'd hear him on occasionally.
Art Bell,
Who?
Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM.
Yeah, and let's see, who was it we were talking about?
Tim the Toolman?
Yeah.
That there are a lot of movie stars, there are musicians, there are a lot of people who are well known. They may not necessarily tell you exactly who they are just right away, but sooner or later you will figure out who it might be. So you don't know. And then you may just talk to Joe Schmo, and he's retired just like you are, and hey, what's the temperature and how many inches of snow did you get? So, any more questions before Barry comes up and he needs to bend your ear a while?
Can you explain QSL cards?
The one time I didn't bring any. You would ask that, Neil. Okay, a QSL card, it's like a 3x5 card. It usually has the station's call sign. Okay, here's my call sign. Let's have the station's call sign on it. It will have the time and the day and everything about when you talk to the guy. And you exchange these, it's like a postcard. And a lot of people collect them. I love to collect them, especially the ones from foreign stations. Except the one that I got, it was from one of the Mid-Eastern countries, and it had, I won't even go about it. It was XXX, let's just put it that way. And I thought, how in the world did it get past the censors in your country, for gosh sakes? But anyway, a lot of people like to collect QSL cards. One of the things many people do, one of the first things they try to do is to make contact with all 50 states and to get cards back from all 50 states. And how many states have you got, Carla?
Oh, I don't know, not all of them.
Well, you
40
can do
maybe?
them. You can do them quickly or slowly. But yeah, QSL cards are a lot of fun to collect, and now a lot of people are shortcutting it because you can email your request along with a PayPal payment of $2 or $3, whatever the postage is going to be coming back, and that speeds it up because that way you. Let's face it, some of the countries, Philippines, their postal system is one step above Pony Express, maybe. And some places, you'll talk to the guy, or you'll see where he has posted, and he'll say, "Don't bother sending QSL cards. He said, our mail's being stolen. It's not reaching us." All kinds of things like that. Sort of like United States mail.
That's what I was just saying.
Okay, any more questions? One more thing I'll bring up. In my call sign, it looks like it says worms. What do you suppose this second letter in my call sign is?
0.
Lady down here, she knows. It's a 0. It's a number. And that's because the United States is divided into 10 districts as far as ham radio is concerned. And it's more or less by population. For example, California is a district all by its lonesome. It's District 6. But we're in District 10, or the 10th district. Illinois, they're in the 9th. You go down to Arkansas, they're in the 5th. So we're kind of right here where we got a lot of people around us that are different districts. But you'll see license plates running around town here, and they'll all have a 0 in their call sign. Okay, any more questions? Barry, you're up.
Thank you, Ernie. So Ernie is my Elmer, and we call it Mentors Elmers. That came from an old magazine article that the ARRL puts out. They had an editorial that said, "Well, we need this done, but Elmer isn't around to do it anymore. We need this done, but Elmer isn't around to do it anymore." So they came up with the name Elmer because they were lamenting the fact there weren't enough people to teach other people how to do ham radio. Ernie has been a good Elmer. He's taken me from what in the world have I got myself into to talking around the world. But what I want to talk about tonight is public service, and I am the emergency coordinator for Cape Girardeau and Boulder County in a group called ARES. ARES is an acronym. It stands for Amateur Radio Emergency Services. We work with state and local government, and if need be, FEMA, to, if there is a disaster, we attempt to assist them when asked, to assist them in communications. So for instance, say an EF4 tornado came through Perryville, which happened a few years ago, and I happened to work with the mother and sister of the young man who perished in that tornado. That tornado happened to also be the largest tornado to hit the continental US that year. Came right through Perryville. And what would happen if that would have gone a little bit south and actually hit the city of Perryville square on? We would have made the national news for all the wrong reasons. At that point, assuming that their stuff was semi-functional, they may reach out to me or somebody else and say, hey, we need some help with communications. Ernie brought up Joplin. In order to communicate on the amateur frequencies, you have to have an amateur radio license, no exceptions. A lot of the police and fire repeaters were damaged or destroyed during the Joplin tornado. So they reached out to the amateur radio operators, and they actually rode shotgun with the sheriff's deputies and the firefighters with the amateur radio in the car, and the officer would say, I need you to reach out and say this to, headquarters. So the amateur radio operator would say, hey, this is going on, yada, yada. So we play a pretty large role in emergencies when asked. That's the key, though, is when asked. We don't self-deploy. We don't show up with our radio and say, hey, here I am, use me. It doesn't work that way. So, when asked, we will serve. My specialty is a program called Skywarn. Skywarn is an agreement between the ARRL and the National Weather Service. And what we do is during emergency weather events, we activate and we do what's called storm spotting. The difference between storm spotting and storm chasing is I do not chase normally. I wait for the storm to come to me. Basically, we give the National Weather Service what is called ground truth. What that means is the radar says this, okay? I call in and say, hey, I've got baseball-sized hail hitting my house right now. That is called ground truth, what's actually happening on the ground. The problem we have here in Cape Girardeau, and it's even worse further west out like by West Plains, Missouri and things, is radar is basically, you see the weather radar, what is that? Radar is radio waves, just like the radar gun they use to pull you over when you're speeding. Somebody back in I believe it was the 1940s, came up with the bright idea, hey, what happens if I shoot radar into a thunderstorm, what happens? They did, and they got the raindrops, reflected it, and brought it back. So they could see the shape of the storm, the rain coming down. And of course, now with computer technology, they've been able to refine that. They've got computers that draw models. So you get your different colors, your red is your really bad, your green is your lighter rain, and so on. Well, the problem we have here is Paducah is our National Weather Service office. It's about, Ernie, what is that air miles to Paducah? What, about 80 miles?
It was about 60.
60? Okay. The earth is a ball, right? Okay, you look north, you can't see the arch, right? Because the earth curves. The same thing happens with radar beams. They take these radar dishes and they shoot the radar out, and they do multi-levels. They'll take a rotation, they'll shoot out here, then they'll raise it, make another rotation, raise it some more. They're trying to get a vertical and horizontal, almost 3D map of the storm. Well, when you're that far away, you can't see the bottom of the storm. All you see is the cloud tops. So the biggest problem they have is they don't get a good view of the storm when it's this far away. So, and we're right between St. Louis, Memphis, and Paducah. Each one of those is just about as far away from us as the other one is, some more so. So they rely on us to give what's called ground truth. And so what I do is I have several spotters, Ernie, Carla, and Larry and Neil are four of my spotters. And we'll have a weather event come out, and usually they spot from home. And I'll get a call, say, from Neil. Neil says, hey, Barry, I've got golf ball size hail coming down to my house. I know what his address is. So I will go on a chat room with the National Weather Service, which they've greatly upgraded the last few years. And I will put in train spotter and on such and such road in Boulder County reports golf ball size hail. They look at that, and that confirms what the radar is telling them. I've actually had somebody in Millersville call in with that very scenario, and 5 minutes later they threw a severe thunderstorm warning that they hadn't thrown yet because of that report. They monitor these chat rooms very closely during severe weather events. That's kind of my piece of the puzzle, the whole ham radio thing. And I come by this honestly. My great-grandfather was killed in a tornado down near Harville, Missouri back in 1938. I have the newspaper article. They found him in a ditch the day after the tornado. one of the earliest memories I have is when I grew up in St. Louis in 1967. A tornado touched down in St. Louis County, not far from where we lived. And I remember waking up. My dad was 3, and my sister Colleen was a baby, like a really little baby. And he was carrying me down the basement stairs. And this carrying, jostling woke me up. And I remember still sitting there on the floor in the southwest corner of the basement, which is what they told us to do back in the day, waiting for this thing to hit. Thankfully, it never did. In 1982, my house in Kirkwood, Missouri was hit by a tornado. And my youngest sister, Molly, was 4 at the time. I was, I was 19, and I was picking my middle sister up at church youth group to bring her home, and because she wasn't old enough to drive yet. And my mom and dad called the church before cell phones and all that stuff, no texting. They said, "Hey, Barry, we've got storm damage, don't come home." For my mom and dad to tell me not to come home, I knew it was bad. So, waited around, found my sister, said, "Hey, we need to, something's bad's happened at home." Told her what they said, and they're like, "Oh." Got another phone call at the church, said, "Okay, you can come home," but we had a tornado. Tornado destroyed our garage, took the second story off our neighbor's house. Molly, my baby sister, was standing in front of the window. My dad said it was like somebody threw a bucket of water in the window, grabbed her, ran for the basement. My mom was in the family room, which was also destroyed by the tornado. Made it all the way to the door jam. The door slammed on her shoulder and pinned her there for the duration of the event because of the pressure and the wind. She never made it to the basement. My dad walked halfway down the stairs and just covered my sister up like a bear hug to shield her from the flying glass and all that other stuff. My mother had very long blonde hair back in the day, and she said she picked glass out of her hair for days afterwards. She'd wash her hair and comb it, and the light would catch the glint of the glass, and she'd be pulling little shards of glass out of her hair for days afterwards. So I come by this, I'm crazy, but I come by it honestly. That's what I tell people. You know, I come by the storm spotting thing honestly. I've got a history of doing this stuff. Thankfully, other than having a daylight scared out of my mom and my dad and my sister were all right. Although the house was kind of tore up, but that got fixed. But that's kind of what kind of got me going on weather stuff. As a kid, when they invented weather radar, when I was in the 1970s, when St. Louis got TV stations that had weather radar, I was fascinated by it. Fast forward several decades, and I got a ham radio license. I thought, hey, this would be kind of cool to use for emergency communications if it ever came to it. And that's what I've been doing ever since. But we help out when asked. We also do some things with like bike races and foot races, some of the public service things we do. There is a race called River to River in Illinois. It goes, I think, from, I don't know what 2 rivers that race between. It's a foot race, I believe. We will set up at different checkpoints along the way in case somebody gets sick, falls down, whatever happens, we can call for help. I helped out with the what they call the gravel race up in Perryville, St. Genevieve in Perryville. There was a race that went mostly on gravel roads started out in St. Genevieve and downtown, went all the way south near Perryville, made a big loop and went back north again. And I was at the point furthest away from the start-finish line, and we had a lady come down a hill really slowly, and believe me, we knew it was a problem. Some of these guys are going 40 or 50 miles an hour on these bikes. These bikes cost probably $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 bicycles, and they have all the gear that go with it and everything. We were at a station, we had snacks for them, and this lady came down the hill real slow. I knew something was wrong. Her legs had cramped up to the point she practically fell off the bicycle, and we had to help her to the bench and sit her down and get her rehydrated, get some electrolytes in her, and even after that, she wasn't able to continue, so we had to call, use the amateur radio through one of our repeaters. We had to call for help, and they brought the van down and picked her up and took her back to the start-finish line where she could get some medical attention. So those are some of the things we can do in amateur radio, and Ernie touched on some of the hobby things. I have an award called DXCC, which is confirmed contacting 100 countries. And I've done that on 3 different bands. Bands are basically groups of frequencies. I've done it overall, and then I've done it on 3 different bands by themselves. You can talk to a lot of people. I had a 45-minute conversation with a guy in Norway about the weather. And it was kind of interesting being a storm spotter and everything. I told him what I was doing. He did something similar there. And we basically came to the conclusion their weather's like ours, only it gets colder earlier and stays colder longer. And they get more snow than we do. They got severe thunderstorms like we do. They don't get the tornadoes that we do. They don't have that geographical thing where you get the hot and cold air mixing just right to give you your big twisters. They don't have that, but they do get damaging winds over there still. So it was kind of interesting to talk to this guy. And whenever people call North America, they speak English because they know here in the United States, most people only speak English. So they have enough English built up to where they can have a conversation. And then if you try to kind of press that a little further, they'll say, no inglés, have a nice day, 73. 73 is a code that means well wishes, like saying goodbye to somebody, hope you have a nice day, that sort of thing, and then they move on because they're kind of embarrassed that their English isn't very good. So, but it's a lot of fun. I have had more fun. I have spent a little bit of money on my equipment, much to the chagrin of my wife. But it's like Ernie said, you can get into the hobby relatively inexpensive, and you can have a lot of fun. I had an 80-meter dipole in my backyard and a Heathkit transceiver that I got from Neil, and put a little money into having a gentleman fix it up to where it worked correctly. And I talked around the world, talked to every continent on the planet, including Antarctica, on an antenna that did not move. And I would be on there on Sunday afternoon. It would be 20 degrees outside and cold as could be and really yucky. And I'd be talking to somebody in South Africa complaining about how hot it was because they're on the flip side of the climate thing. So that's kind of what I do with this is the public service side. I have a lot of fun with it. If you're interested in getting involved in it, please let me know. First thing, of course, you have to have a radio license. And then they do have some FEMA training that if you're going to be deployable, they want you to go through. And the reason for that is so you understand the command structure if you are deployed. Like if you work at an emergency operations center, you need to know what the authority structure is just so you don't, don't do something wrong and not realize it. Know who's in charge, who do you answer to, who's going to be the one asking you to do things. You just kind of know who's doing what, so you're not confused, and you can be really helpful. But if you're interested in that or getting your license, talk to one of us. We'll be glad to give you some ideas, excuse me, on how to do that. And what I mainly need, if you're interested in getting your license, just a little plug for Skywarn. I need more storm spotters. And the reason being is I need more people covering Cape and Bollinger counties because the more people that cover it, the more data points I have. It could be Larry over there could have, he's got heavy rain. Carla can have baseball-sized hail. And Neil's wondering what the big deal is because there's nothing happening in his house. I've seen it happen. So the more people that I get giving me information and feeding that to the National Weather Service, and I don't give your name, and I don't, don't do that. I don't give your exact address. I may give you your street so they know where you are in the county. That way they can correlate what's going on with the radar. And the sooner I get the information, I immediately type it in. If it's something really important, I'll type it in. And that can help them throw warnings, watches. We had one situation where we had a level 5 risk for severe weather. If you notice on KFES, Granddad will be up there and he'll be talking about, we're under a slight risk. There's 5 levels of risk for severe weather. Marginal is 1, slight is 2, moderate is, enhanced is 3, moderate is 4, and high is 5. If they throw a level 5 risk for severe weather, if you ever see that in Cape Girardeau County, you need to pay attention. They only do that when they're really certain something's going to happen. I've only seen it happen one time in all the years I've been doing this, and I got a phone call from Dick Knopf, who was the EOC director at Cape County before he retired, And he's like, "Hi Barry, where you at?" "I'm at work." "Okay, why aren't you home?" "Because I'm getting paid to be here." Yeah, and he's like, "Okay, I need you to get home as soon as you can." The National Weather Service had called him and said, "It's not a matter of if, but when we get hit." And they were saying it's gonna be bad, and sure enough it was. There was a guy who was spotting for me at Center Junction, and he saw a tail just keep doing this with the funnel cloud, just kept wanting to drop. Thankfully it never actually became a tornado, and a tornado is when it touches the ground. So you can have a funnel up in the air, but until it touches the ground, it's not a tornado. And it kept coming down like it was gonna touch, but then it lifted back up again. So that's the kind of thing that we were able to give the National Weather Service. They can't see on their radar scopes and everything. So it's really important what we're doing, and it's really rewarding when you get through a storm and you had something really bad happen. You were able to tell them about it, and then you get done at the end of the day. I believe personally, I'll get a little bit off the ham radio soapbox. I believe that as a Christian, I am required to serve my community in any way, that any of the gifts that God has given me. And this is one of the things that sometimes your passions are, that still small voice that Jan had mentioned. Sometimes your passions are your giftings that God has given you. I play guitar. That's a gift God's given me. I use that whenever I can at church. But one of the other things He's given me is a fascination with the weather. And that to me is kind of one of the gifts. I've learned a little bit from school. I've taken storm spotter classes with the National Weather Service, which they offer for free, by the way, if you're interested in becoming a storm spotter. National Weather Service offers usually around once a year. They offer classes. If you Google Skywarn, National Weather Service Paducah Skywarn training, you'll probably come up with a website that'll tell you where the next training is going to be. And usually they're in the late winter, early spring, before the severe weather season really gets going. So that's how I kind of approach it. So that's what motivates me to get up at 2 a.m. when this weather radio goes off and everybody else is asleep, and I get up and turn on the radio just to see if there's any spotters awake or not, look at the radar and watch what's going on outside. So it's kind of a passion of mine. So that's what I've got. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Barry, in order to be a storm spotter, what level of license, amateur radio license, do you have to be able to talk to you and explain what they're saying?
You have to have at least a technician. The lowest level license will get you privileges to talk on our repeaters. That's all you have to be a storm spotter.
Now, Ernie showed a radio that cost $20. Could individuals that do not have their amateur radio license be able to use that to listen to what's going on?
Listen only, yes. You cannot transmit without an amateur radio license. You can listen though. But the second you hit that push to talk button, that's a problem until you get your license. But yeah, when you become a storm spotter with the National Weather Service, you don't have to be a ham radio operator. I just kind of coordinate the spotters around here through amateur radio. If you go through their class, you pass their class, which is really easy to do, and they do a really good job of training people. And you're driving, down the road, and you see something like a funnel cloud, you pull off the side of the road. They give you an 800 number to call in, and it's for spotters only. It's not something you share with the general public. It's for spotters only. They give you a code that basically says how soon you were certified. Like the ones here, I'll have 2025 in them. You say, I was storm spotter with the National Weather Service. This is my code. I see a funnel cloud at mile marker 125 on I-55 southbound. And you just tell them what you see. They say, thank you very much. And then they probably, if they haven't already, they'll probably throw a warning at that point. So, any other questions? Okay, very good. Carla, you're up next.
Thank you, Barry. Hi, I'm Carla. Can you all hear me? Fine? My call is AE0YA, and if you read it, which you can see on my shirt here, looks like you're saying a karate chop. Hi-ya. And phonetically, it's Alpha Echo 0 Yankee Alpha. I've been a ham radio operator for about 1.5 years, and I am one of the 75%, like Ernie mentioned, who has a radio and a wire antenna. And it was really fun. This isn't part of my 5 minutes. This is an aside. It was really fun on Christmas morning to turn on my radio and talk to somebody in South Wales. And I was like, oh, I just love my wire. They're my magical wire. So I wanted to just talk to you briefly about the experience I had in testing for my amateur radio license. And before I get to that, I want to mention that I first visited the SEMO Amateur Radio Club because I wanted an alternative means of communication with our 2 daughters who are living out west. And I figure at some point I'm going to need to be able to communicate when this entire network isn't working for communication. And anyway, so I found a really wonderful group of people, salt of the earth people at this club, and they are they're just excited for new people to come and more than happy to help anybody get their license and get on the air. And so I wanted to mention to you my experience with testing and studying for the test. And to kind of answer the earlier question, I too had the thought when I was first told, get your license, and then you'll learn what you need to know. So learn the correct answers, get your license, and learn what you need to know. Then you'll learn what you need to know. Well, there's a lot of areas you can go in ham radio that you may not even be aware of all the different avenues and things that people can do in ham radio. Anyway, to start, I found one of the books that is by the American Radio Relay League, like Ernie had mentioned. Wonderful book, very detailed, goes into great theory on electricity and just all of the things that are required to understand amateur radio. But I knew that for me, that wasn't going to work as a testing prep because it would probably take me 10 years. I read the first book twice. That was the technician level, the first level. And I sometimes in the entire chapter, I couldn't find the question that went with the answers. And I was like, man, this isn't going to work for me. I've got maybe an hour a day I can spend on this. And so I did a search and I found some books that were, the tagline on it is all ham and no spam. And this is what I used. This along with an app called hamstudy.org. So these books, they're small books, relatively big print. And he basically goes through and gives you, there's 10 elements, which is a chapter. So there's 10 chapters or sections. They call them an element, but they will go through and give you in each element the questions and the correct answer and just a little bit of an explanation. They don't go into the full theory because there's other books you can read for all of that. Sometimes he'll tell you the best way to remember that answer, maybe the 3-digit number, the 2 outside digits add up to equal the middle digit, or other clues. There's even some questions in here where he'll say, you're never ever going to need this, just memorize the answer. So some of these things in the tests are, if you're going to build a radio, you would need to know those things, but I don't think I'm going to build a radio. I want to be an end user, and this is what worked for me. So I would read, say, element 1, and just read it enough to be familiar. It's in my brain. I didn't memorize it. I didn't look up all the acronyms. I just read the section. And then I would go that evening, I'd take my iPad outside, run my dogs, and go on hamstudy.org, and I would start looking at the study section for element 1 and just keep going through it until I get my comprehension up to maybe about 80%, and I do the same thing with each of the elements. And so you could probably read an element. I think I would like read half of it at coffee in the morning and the other half at lunch, and then that evening I would start looking at these the elements at thishamstudy.org. About a week out, I would do this September 2023, I started studying for the October meeting so I could test at the October meeting. About a week before, that's when you start taking practice tests on, or I did, taking practice tests on this hamstudy.org, and you watch it keeps track of your level and how you're doing, and you can see your pass-fail line, and you can really walk into your test feeling relatively certain you're going to be able to pass this test. If you're at about an 85% rate, you kind of know you're going to do all right. And that's what worked for me for the technician and then the general. And I wasn't even going to get my extra, had no plans to do that, but my Elmer, Ernie, is very good at nudging me and has said, you're in the study mode and you've got a system. And I'm so glad he had me do it, because now I have my extra, and it just worked for me. And what I want to encourage you all is, if you're interested and maybe you don't, this doesn't come naturally for me. I'm a quilter, like Ernie said. I design quilt patterns and textiles and graphic design stuff. I like pretty things. So electrical, not so much. It just doesn't come naturally for me. But I just encourage you to find your method of study, and you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. And if you've got a commute, there are YouTubes that will teach you all of the theory, or they'll just element 1, question 5, and they'll give you the question and the correct answer, and that's a way to learn too. And you can look at your license as a ticket to really learning. Once you get that license, you can figure out the practical things that you need to get on the air, and that's what it's about, getting on the air. One thing that I didn't think that I would have any interest in, and I'm now in my 3rd month of learning Morse code. And the reason it sparked my interest was because, I don't think I said this, when I called my girls and told them I passed my first test, they both voluntarily said, "We're gonna do it too, Mom." I'm like, yay, this is great. Well, they haven't yet. And, but I am 100% certain that they never would if I hadn't done this first. So the seeds are planted. And with CW, Morse code, you can transmit across country with as little as 5 watts of power, like Neil had said, and a wire. And they love to go camping and adventuring and summiting, and so I could see them. My plan is, next time we drive out to Idaho or Oregon, I want to hike with them and go do some CW and just show them how we could talk back and forth to each other that way, the way Neil and his son do. Anyway, so that's just kind of my experience with this. The club is a wonderful group of people who will just really help you. Everybody's excited in the ham world to see new hams come in, and I think that's all I had to say. Any questions?
I got one comment though. One thing that Ernie touched on, and you did too. We talk about cell phones, that they can go down at any time, but also radio, it's been around forever, but the technology,
Yes.
You do? Okay. The technology has kept up with the real world. Now, what I mean by that, Ernie touched on it a while ago, that he was talking with his computer hooked up to his radio, sending a signal out somewhere else. And that person's radio was receiving it, translating it into their computer, and then they can communicate back and forth. But there's another aspect that can help Carla out talk to her girls. We have in our repeater system a term called Echolink. Okay, Echolink is, we have a station in Cape Girardeau that can receive cell phone. You can put an app on your cell phone and you can call into our radio receiver on this. Now, you still have to have a license. You still have to have a call sign because you are using part of the ham radio system. No way around that. But if our local systems, if where Carla lives, if her power is down or her cell service was down, her daughters could call into Cape Girardeau on this, hit our transfer unit here, and she could talk to her daughter on her radio. So technology in ham radio has really come a long way. And all the modern radios that we have, most of them is called SDR, software defined radio, which means that they have computer technology in them. These radios will do a whole lot more than I know what to do with the radio I have. And most of the operators, there's very few of them that can do everything that these radios are capable of. But that's just another form of communication that you can do.
Would an EMP take out ham radio too?
It's electronic system, so I would say it could.
Oh.
Now, you can shield them, just like you do any other electronics. You can shield them. But yeah, they are subject to just like any other electronics. But I just wanted to throw that out there. They mentioned it, but like I said, these radios, the technology in these things are totally different than they were in the 1940s and 50s. I mean, they are insanely technical. But anyway, I just wanted to add some of those things into it.
I have a test-taking tip for multiple choice. If you cover up the answers, read the question, see if you know it, and if it's in the list, you got it. But if you see them all, then your mind goes, ee. So that's one way that students, we did it when I taught school, so it's kind of a handy tip.
Answering your question about EMP, Barry has an old Heathkit radio, and a lot of amateur radios have those, and those are tube operated, and they're not affected by EMP. So your older radios are that way. That's why the Soviet air bombers and aircraft have the old tubes still on them, because if there's a nuclear war, they'll still be up and flying. One thing I wanted to mention, Rita and I were doing the Blue Ridge Parkway up to Skyline Drive, and we were evacuated. They said there was a bad storm coming, and we had to get off the Blue Ridge Parkway, and we ended in a town called Asheville for the hurricane, and everything went down. And there was the cell phones were down, and one thing I wanted to mention to y'all is there was a young man walking around, and I said, "What are you doing? The cell phones are down." And he says, "No, I'm trying to connect to the satellite." If you have an iPhone 14 or newer, there's a mode on here that you can connect or send a message by satellite up and to whoever you want to send it to. So that's a way of having emergency communications even if the cell phone tower's down. I'm not sure if it links through Starlink or whatever, but it does work. It works really well. When we were able to evacuate or get out of Asheville after several days, Rita loaded it into her phone and started trying it out, and it worked great.
Because we tend to camp where there's no cell phone reception.
Well, I'll make one last comment before it close down, and this is directed toward the ladies. In the ham radio world, ladies are always YLs, young ladies. And in amateur radio, and I think Carla will probably agree to this, there is no glass ceiling as far as gender is concerned. And in fact, we have what's called the YL factor. And that's if a woman comes on and she's calling a station, typically that station will answer the YL first, because y'all's voices are higher pitched and you penetrate and are easier to understand than us guys. So there is no glass ceiling. Right now we have 11 women who are licensed in our club, Carla being one of the newest ones. And we would really welcome any more of you YLs who would like to come and become ham radio operators. And after the meeting is closed, go ahead and talk to any of you about it. Thank you so much.